He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see, it's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Hey y'all, we are back. Hope you enjoyed producer Steve's summer series of reruns. Some great stuff from the archives. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks, Steve, for doing it while I was on my first vacation in 10 years, including nonstop shows like this for 5 years. Being away from you was rough, but I'm back. Okay, I'm still Steve Abramowitz, and this is still the Heartland Journal podcast. On this show, we are focused on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest Apostate Ari. D-Trans Apostate Ari is an advocate for survivors of surgical harm. The transphobic historian you can follow on X at Apostate Ari. In this powerful and deeply personal conversation, I sit down with Ari, someone who brings both lived experience and extensive research to one of the most complex and confusing issues of our time. Ari is an old school trans individual who has undergone full medical transition, including bottom surgery, and is now in the process of detransitioning. Formerly aligned with the leftist ideology, Ari now works to educate parents and advocate for the protection of children. Looking for true trans. Let's find out together where to find this in history and what it means for us today and our kids for the future. Hang on. Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on with us. Seattle, right? You're in Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle.
My old
Oh, Mill
hometown
Creek.
of Mill Creek. Yeah.
hmm
Has Mill Creek treated you well? How long have you been there?
I've been here about 3 years. It's a nice part of town. I like
Okay.
it. It's a little removed from the Seattle kerfuffle.
That's true. Yeah. So I've been here 5. So you came in right on the tail end of me getting out of there and you getting in there. And I saw a clip of you in front of the city council. And I remember Stephanie when she was just a councilwoman. Now she's the mayor. So good for you for standing up to those folks. The question I keep coming up with when I have discussions about transitioning and detransitioners like Chloe Cole that I find most interesting is why. Why do you think you weren't the sex or gender you were assigned at birth?
Why was I confused about gender?
Why do you think that came about? And from
Well,
I know you can't speak for everybody, but just why do you think in the very origin story, why did you believe that?
well, I was raised by a guy who like nitpicked me for the way I was as a child. Like one of the first beatings I remember getting was for the way I put my hands on my hips. I spent most of my life very isolated and detached from my peers because of a combination of trauma and autism. I like heavily related to my mother. We went through a very abusive environment, um, and I didn't feel right as a boy. Like I had like this complex that something was fundamentally wrong with me. Um, and I always pined after love and romance. That's what I wanted out of life. Like I wanted a white knight to come and save me from my childhood. I romanticized that. Um, and so I was just very confused. And when I found out that some people allegedly were born in the wrong body, it seemed like that was the answer.
You mentioned autism. Was that actually diagnosed, or did
Oh,
you?
yeah, I was clinically diagnosed with autism and complex PTSD as a teenager.
Is there a correlation in some way? Because I hear a lot of that autism and transitioning sort of.
I think there's a couple different ways that autism compounds with the factors that lead to someone ideating as trans. If you're autistic, then you're naturally going to be socially isolated from your peers. You're going to feel from my experience, I felt like an alien as a kid. And the only people I got on with were the girls. I definitely didn't feel like the other boys. And when I found out I was attracted to the boys, that was even more confusing. So, like, there's that. And then there's rumination, just being prone to being in your head more, you know? So, like, if I wasn't autistic, I probably wouldn't have obsessed about what was wrong with me on that level. It wouldn't have become my constant question, like, what is wrong with me? Just because I felt that there was something wrong with me, it wouldn't have become a constant driving obsession.
Hmm.
Um, so my discomfort from my trauma probably wouldn't have been as bad. Like I would have been traumatized, but it was compounded by obsessive rumination.
Well, thank you for sharing. So honestly, I'm curious, it seems like a very easy barrier between deciding that or homosexuality, where you said you were attracted to the boys. That would be normally like when I was younger in the 70s and 80s, I'd be somebody who was maybe homosexual. Where do you think the link was broken where you actually said, no, I'm born in the wrong body?
That I actually don't know because when I was a child, so when I was a kid, I started reading books obsessively. It was an escape from what was going on. I started with Harry Potter, but I didn't have a lot of money. I got these gift cards every year for Barnes and Noble, and I'd go pick out a book or two that I wanted, like the next book in the series, generally a child series that I'd be reading. And then I'd read my mother's cast off books. And she was an abused woman reading romance novels, you know? So, like, my early romanticizations were all heterosexual, you know? There were no books of gay couples. So I was a traumatized autistic boy reading romance novels of heterosexual love. And all I wanted was love.
Hmm.
But I didn't want a woman. I wanted a man, you know? And even before I hit puberty and I started having sexual feelings and my body started responding to those kinds of things, I romanticized the idea of being with men
Hmm.
very early.
So like a heart of a woman inside of a boy's body. That makes
That's
a
how I
lot of
felt,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah. I interviewed a woman from San Francisco that was front and center on the equal rights for gays and lesbian movements in the 70s and 80s. Joey Bright is her name, a documentarian now. Don't know if you've ever heard of her.
I love Joey Bright.
There you go. So she wasn't at all happy about the TQ plus part of the acronym, grabbing onto all the hard work she put into making gay rights human rights. Do you also think that the trans movement has kind of hijacked the civil rights component of equality movement, or do you have a point like any marginalized group in American society, they should have that rights too?
Well, I think that, like, I think these groups have basically become groups that are completely centered around identity. And it started out in the name of advocacy, but it's begun to be erasure. Everybody's been lumped together into a giant alphabet acronym, and parts of that acronym conflict, you know? Trans is at its foundation somewhat contradictory to what it means to be a homosexual. Like the way they've gone is erasing what it means to be a homosexual, promoting this idea that you can change your sex when you can't, promoting this idea that sexual orientation is based on gender. It's not, it's sexual orientation, it's based on your sex. And they separated gender from sex in their ideology, and then they've advocated for everything that should be based on and historically has been based on sex to be given over to gender. But it doesn't work that way. A lesbian's never going to sleep with a male. A gay male, a homosexual male, is never going to sleep with a female, even if she ideates as a gay male. And so there's this level of erasure that's occurring. And the same thing occurs when you get into like the I, you know, they keep adding these various different things on the intersex thing. Like that's just people with DSDs. That's people with medical conditions. You know, that doesn't fundamentally have anything to do with sexual orientation or with trans status or anything like that.
What are
But they're
DSDs?
constantly DSDs are developmental sexual disorders, like
Mm-hmm.
they call them intersex in like the trans lingo and the queer lingo, but there's like a whole bunch of different anomalies that can happen at birth that can cause different developmental pathways to be messed up in different ways. Like there's women who are born a little different and men who are born a little different because they have a DSD. It's a whole bunch of them. There's like over 60 of them, I think, and they're medical conditions, you know? And so you have that being used as a talking point by transgender ideologues constantly, just constantly. And those are people who have a medical condition. I run into them all the time where they feel like they're being appropriated by the alphabet, acronym.
It's kind of like what a
Um,
community organizer does, where they just try to bring all these disparagement groups
mhm.
into one big lump so they can say like, "Hey, we vote as a block," and that
Yeah.
doesn't always work so well. Do
Well,
you think the end game of the political side we're talking about now, not the
mhm.
human emotional side, because you made a very good point that if you look at two lesbian women's in a loving relationship, they think one of them really should be a man, but they say no, we're just women who like women. Okay, so do you think it's become a way to force Medicare taxpayer money to pay for the surgeries? I know that's super cynical, I know, but we've seen out of the medical professional and frauds in Minnesota with hospice and autism and hungry kids and Social Security these days. It's profit over people. So why not
Right.
transitioning too, right? Big money
Oh,
involved.
there's a lot of money to be made in transitioning a person, and a lot of it was being done under Medicaid and Medicare before Trump came in and nipped that in the bud. And so that is how it was being funded for a lot of these operations. That's money going from the taxpayer directly to private corporations, and it's at the expense of the taxpayer, and it's also at the expense of the mentally unwell person who hasn't really had truly informed consent because they're not diagnosing why people feel this way. They're just diagnosing that they feel this way. Gender dysphoria is nothing more than a list of symptoms in the DSM that can be caused by a multitude of different things. Like for me, it was caused by trauma and internalized homophobia and all of this stuff going on, right? But we weren't asking the question why even almost 20 years ago. And we're definitely not asking the question why now that we've pushed a system of affirmation, right? Where you can get a telemedicine 15-minute therapy session that gets you a letter to modify your body. And once you get that letter, now you're a profit cow, you're a cash cow for big pharma. And that's the thing, like with no other mental health condition in our society is the treatment to affirm the delusional state of the individual and then profiteer on modifying their body. We don't tell Eugenia Cooney and women with anorexia that they are fat and then offer them Ozempic and liposuction.
Do you think the violent outbursts that we're seeing out of the trans community is because Trump kicked the hornet's nest when they thought they were so close to the holy grail of government funding surgeries and free drugs?
I think it goes into the mentality of someone who has this belief set. Like when you are trans and you identify as trans, you have all of these symptoms that make you feel you don't feel this way for no reason, generally. You don't just start modifying your body for no reason. For me, I was very depressed. I had suicidal ideation, a lot of anxiety, and so I accepted this framework that trans and gender was what was causing these feelings. And that's what you're doing when you accept the gender dysphoria diagnosis and transition is treatment. And so there's this idea that the reason you're feeling this way is because you're a woman trapped in a man's body. And the only way to feel better is to transition, right? And so you almost like let go of your old self and you embrace this new life and this new lifestyle. And when people don't affirm that, when people don't agree with that, they're disagreeing with what you believe is the only thing that's going to make you feel better, the only thing that's going to make you feel like a whole person, you know? And so they have a very violent reaction to that. The idea that they're going to lose access to the ease of these interventions causes panic because they all feel like this is the only thing that's going to make their lives better.
Then
And
they
many of
talk,
them did not ask the question why they feel this way.
they just go with it. When they talk about in politics trans genocide, is that a dog whistle to people on the edge of being triggered already?
Oh, absolutely. When I was trans identified, I used to post pictures of myself with my 2A rights displayed, and I'd say, there's no trans genocide. The solution to the fictional trans genocide was given to us when the country was founded. It's non-existent. This is one of the greatest countries on this planet to be a non-conforming gay. Period. If you present out of the spectrum for your sex, this is one of the greatest countries in the world. And we have three empires on this planet that are large military powers, and none of them get along. And the United States of America is the one military power that lets us be, that lets us exist. And I think a lot of these people don't realize where this comes from and what the world was like in the early 20th century. And like, I'm the transphobic historian. This is what I study: Magnus Hirschfeld, Havelock Ellis, John Money. So I know that when this ideology was conceived, we existed in a world where you were not allowed to exist. And I know what that looks like.
I
And
want
these
to dig
people are
into that too when we
delusional.
can. You said one country, but actually Israel has more trans refugees in their system from Gaza, which I never understood the whole trans and gays for Gaza, because they would throw you off a building if you were there yelling about, not you, but them
Mhm.
yelling. What do you make of this? Is it just because you're a historian and they're really not thinking about history and everything started yesterday? Or how could this disconnect be where they can just look at a newspaper and see that, yeah, they kill gay people in the Middle East, much less let them riot and yell and scream in New York?
Well, I mean, I think they're just moving lockstep like a herd. You know, they like the Queers for Palestine thing was one of the things that really just made me go, whoa, whoa. I used to be on the left, you know, and I used to work in politics on the left and advocate for Americans with disabilities. And I did that as a trans woman. And, you know, the Queers for Palestine really just made me pause. I don't understand the mentality other than you're just following in lockstep with the intersectionalism pushed by the Democratic Party. And that's the thing. The LGBTQIA demographic is basically an identitarian cluster created to be a voter base for the Democratic Party. And like, this is exemplified 100%. And my friends and I getting assaulted in Cal Anderson, a historic gay park in the center of Seattle, because I was wearing a red hat that didn't even say "Make America Great Again." It said "Make common sense great again."
Could have been a Cincinnati Reds hat, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
isn't that interesting? Because you cannot step off the reservation on the left because they can't afford to have anyone on the fringe. It has to be
yeah.
100% in unison, or else we don't want you here, no matter how wonderful you are. They did this to Jimmy Carter, basically. His legacy
Hmm.
was, well, no, you're too moderate. We got to go. JFK could not be the leader of the
Yeah.
Democratic Party to this day.
The wrong kind of gay. That's what my friends and I say. We're the wrong kind of gay to
Wrong
be in
kind
the
of
gay
gay.
neighborhood. We're the wrong kind of gay to be in the gay neighborhood.
Oh, it's terrible.
Hmm.
So they're exclusionary of their own friends and allies. Let's go back to the beginning a little bit. You started attending gender dysphoria support groups as a teenager.
Hmm.
Can you walk us through what was going on in your life at that time and what drew you to those spaces? Looking back, do you feel those groups helped you explore your options, or did they inadvertently narrow your path towards transition, making it a mistake? An unavoidable mistake, I should say.
I was on my own, jumping from place to place to place. Um, I had gotten out of treatment for my childhood fairly recently. Um, I was pretty damaged. I mean, I had just gotten a diagnosis of CPTSD, and I'd spent a year and a half in a hospital as an adolescent, and then I was just on my own, and I was jumping from place to place to place. I don't think I stayed in the same place for longer than a month
Mm.
for most of the first year. The first 2 years, I was all over the place. But the only place that I had consistency was this youth center. And sometimes I volunteered and worked across the street at this AIDS clinic. That's how I found out about it. Um, and so I was just the gay teenage front desk boy, basically. And I found out they had free therapy. Um, and I went in there, I was very conflicted. I didn't I didn't want to be gay. I didn't call myself a homosexual. I actually went in there thinking that all of it, like the way I felt about my body, my depression, even being gay, was caused by trauma. That's what I went in there thinking. I had deep, deep, deep shame
Mm.
for liking men.
So you just second guessed every thought you had, not knowing who you were because you just never settled into a personality, so to speak.
Well, and I had been touched as a kid, and so I was associating that with my feelings towards men.
Hmm.
Um, and
Terrible.
so I had very deep shame. And, there's this whole thing where being gay is natural and we roll with that. Like we don't have a lot of data to say that it's naturally occurring actually, but we roll with it and that's fine. We also do the same thing with trans. Um, and they're not comparable. Sexual orientation and trans are not the same thing
No.
at all. Um, like this is a condition allegedly where you have such a mismatch between your brain and your body that you need to modify your body on an extreme level or you'll allegedly unalive, you know. Sorry,
It's like
drunk
Lady
language.
Gaga's song, "You're Born This
Mhm.
Way." Maybe that has a lot more to do with L and G when it comes to trans. Now you're talking about like your brain is telling you something that your rest of your body chemicals don't agree with.
Exactly. And so like with LNG, these are just, we see animals that engage in homosexual acts, Penguins, there's penguins that are gay and they stay together for life. They mate for life. They even steal eggs and go raise the eggs. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Um, yeah, there's gay penguins out there. But trans is not the same.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's supposed to be this medical condition, but it's treated like being gay, like a queer identity. And
Yeah.
so we have this model of affirmation where the approach is always to never ask why. That's bigotry.
Right.
Asking why is conversion therapy, asking why is bigotry.
Well,
Like
anything that would
supporting.
need cosmetic surgery to validate can't be born that way because that wouldn't make any sense. Why weren't you
Well, right.
born the way you were supposed to be born, right?
There was no transition before Magnus Hirschfeld invented it.
When
There
was
was
that?
no.
When was that? 18 something? 17 something?
1910,
Oh, not more
1920s.
recent
Yeah,
even. Okay.
Weimar Republic. This and that's the thing. You have non-conforming people throughout history, but you don't have non-conforming people unaliving because they can't chop up their bodies. You don't have that. You have non-conforming people fitting into various different indigenous cultures and ancient cultures as best they can based on the gender dynamics of that society.
I
But
think
you
he was
don't
one of
have
those
them.
people, right? Didn't he? Wasn't he actually homosexual, but he was
Magnus.
hiding in the Nazi
That's This is what broke me on trans. Magnus Hirschfeld was a non-conforming homosexual man during the Weimar Republic. He was an
pre-Hitler.
academic. He was studying sexology. He wrote the book on the original books on sexology, and it's interesting because we pretend now like everything in trans is one thing. It's all the same thing. It's just trans. It's gender identity. It doesn't come from anywhere. We don't ask the question why, but we didn't always do that. Throughout all of history, actually, we very much asked the question why, all the way up until the ideological capture of modern times.
Yeah, that's what
And so, like,
Aristotle and Plato and Darwin were all, not Darwin so much as Galileo, why does the sun stay centered and yeah, why? The question why, that's what it's all about.
so many different people have different reasons for feeling this way. And, people harp on about autogynephilia. You know what autogynephilia is?
That's when they say that they're opposite sex, but they're using it to basically sexually arouse themselves in girls' locker rooms. That's why I left Seattle, to be honest with you.
Autogynephilia is a man's propensity to be sexually aroused to the thought of himself as a woman.
Ah,
It's basically erotic target identity inversion with a male who's attracted to females, where instead of being attracted to women, he's attracted to the idea of himself as a woman. And it was coined by Ray Blanchard in Toronto in the 80s. But that's not actually where it started. It was observed all throughout trans history. When you go to This book here, which I have it covered up with an angel, but it's kind of it's poetic to me. This is Transvestites: The Erotic Drive to Cross-Dress by Magnus Hirschfeld. Same book here, The Transvestite, and this was written in 1910. And in chapter 2, it goes into differential diagnosis. And Magnus Hirschfeld basically writes out and describes a series of homosexuals with severe trauma and internalized homophobia who are trying to run away from the environmental conditions that existed in the Weimar Republic, and autogynephilia. That's what he describes in those chapters. And so it's like when I started diving back through history after I was canceled by the left in 2023, everything just started crumbling. It just started crumbling. I started participating in conversations I'd never participated in because I was a leftist. You get canceled. You can't talk about trans as a leftist, even if you are trans. I knew that, you know? And so I started talking to trans people, and I started talking to TERFs, and the TERFs kind of left a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow,
What are
actually.
TERFs again?
A trans exclusionary radical feminist. So I like to call them impacted women. They're
Like
women who upset a trans person at some point
like
because they
Joey.
have a position. Like Joey. Joey is definitely a TERF. Joey is
Maybe the original,
100% a TERF.
maybe the original
Yeah,
TERF.
one of the OGs for sure, for sure. And
I'll tell her
actually
that.
another. Oh yeah, well she knows that. Where is, I think I might have.
Yeah, a lot of books back there. If you're watching on
Oh
Rumble, you
God,
can
yeah,
see them.
no, I've got so many books back here. It's horrible. There's one, I think I left it in my living room because I was rereading a chapter. I'm not going to get up and go get it, but there's a book called Transgender, Transsexual, Transhumanism by Jennifer Billick. Um, that's one of the big ones that I read that just really piqued me. I read Trans by Helen Joyce and Transsexual, Transgender, Transhumanism by Jennifer Billick. And I went and collected a whole bunch of ancient books about trans history and read a bunch of sexology and talked to a bunch of trans people and talked to a bunch of TERFs. And in the end, I decided that I had based my entire life on a lie.
Yeah, you
And I
did the
just,
one thing that you're not supposed to do, and that's go ask questions, and you got your answers, and they didn't like the answers. And even though they're true, which is what this show is dedicated to, truth, you've spoken about undergoing years of life-altering medical procedures. During that process, did any medical or mental health professional, God willing, dig into underlying issues like your trauma, your depression, even your autism before greenlighting hormones and surgery? What was the evaluation process actually like? And did they just not ask questions?
so like my last surgery, I had epilepsy. It's in remission now.
Good.
So I was disabled. I was homeless. I sold myself for a huge portion of my late teens and early 20s. Um, and I traveled across the country thinking the only way that I'm going to feel better about my body and be able to have that romance and love that I wanted is if I managed to finish my transition. But I was not operable. I had grand mal seizures really bad. I had a lot of seizures pretty regularly. And so um, I was kind of in this malaise state. I ended up having liver damage, I think around 24. It was around 24, 2015. And I had an orchiectomy right before I got out to the West Coast.
Was that?
Um, that's where they remove both of your testicles.
Oh,
And I had that orchiectomy because I was told that I couldn't be on spironolactone, which is the T blockers anymore, and I couldn't do monotherapy on E. And so I needed to have no testosterone, which required a surgery, or stop transition. And now at this point, I had gone from being in that hospital as a teenager and having all of these horrible feelings and being isolated and feeling like an alien to accepting trans and gender as the narrative and the issue, and transition as the solution, and being years and years into that and having years and years of suffering. And so I went and I had my balls removed and kept going. And then
and
I
and
went
and
back.
Painkillers, would that have been a part of that? Because that must be excruciating. So did you have
I
some
had a
op
black market surgery, so I went in and they did local anesthetic and they removed them. They sent me out with some stitching and no medicine. I had nothing.
wow. And
Um,
the recovery process must have been hell?
yeah, it was really bad actually. They messed up on the stitching a little bit down there and it cut off a section of skin that turned black and slowly crumbled and fell off and left a really bad scar.
Oh my gosh. Were they
Um,
planning on doing the vagioplasty or something? Or what was the
No, I was
next?
just quick to get them gone so I could stay on estrogen and then
Oh,
went across the country further. Came out here to the West Coast and put my seizures into remission to then have the other surgeries. Again, thinking that this is the only thing that's going to make it okay. So I
right.
came out here, and that was my goal. That's what drove me across the country,
Is there
was
something
putting my
about the Pacific
epilepsy into
Northwest that
remission.
was a magnet for this? Is that
Medical
why?
cannabis, medical cannabis, and the thought that like in the Pacific Northwest, it was pro-trans and there was enough of a cannabis industry that was old enough that I'd be able to get what I needed to not have seizures at a price affordable enough that I could put them into remission on a disability check.
Makes sense.
So that was the idea. The FDA approved pill was like $40,000 a year. Insurance wouldn't cover it. I couldn't afford it. I tried so many different drugs trying to get it into remission. And at the time, this is the crazy part, I had no idea that the transition itself was making it worse.
Sure.
I had no idea that the estrogen was making worse. Nobody told me. Nobody told me the
Right.
estrogen was making it worse.
So there's the answer to the
Um,
question is no, they didn't look at the cause and effect of what they were doing. They were just doing it.
yeah,
Um,
and then I come out here. I come out here, um, put it into remission. I went into this Catholic health center, and there was a woman there, an endocrinologist, that knew that the estrogen was making it worse. And but I had no testicles. So she put me on patches, like these low dose of patches,
hmm.
and that combined with the RSO helped me get it into remission. And then I tore my face off and my genitals off.
Tore your face off?
Uh huh, both face and genitals.
Oh my goodness.
And along the way, I got my life together, got off a disability, put my seizures into remission, fell in love, got into therapy for my childhood trauma because I really wanted to maintain this relationship that I'm in now. And that was a couple years ago,
Is
four,
that the dream one
four or
you told
five
us
years ago.
about originally that you wanted to be with a man or as a woman or what?
No, my husband's a
How's
man.
it? Okay.
Um,
So I
and
want to dig more into this too, but I kind of want to spread it around so we don't run out of time together. But I can't help but watch Madison Avenue. They love to capitalize on trends to cash in. I don't blame them. It's their job. But do you
yeah,
see
that's
any
true.
subversive or maybe harmfulness in what they do with cultural issues, like in the movies and TV, and especially commercials and kids programming? Are they
I,
getting rich on harming kids like cigarettes used to target minors?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because like gender dysphoria is something that can be induced. Like that's the thing. Like you can take like a finicky gay boy who's got like all of this environmental feedback, right? Like you walk wrong for a boy, you're too sensitive for a boy, you don't like the right things for a boy, you're not right as a boy. You got that kind of feedback going on, and you're an obsessive gay boy, right? Like when I was a teenager, every curl had to be perfect. Every curl had to be perfect. And then you tell them that the way you're getting all this feedback because maybe you're the wrong gender, and they accept that narrative, right? You know how in our society you have all of this unrealistic imagery of women. You have like the Kardashians and all the plastic surgery and stuff, and how that makes women feel about their bodies. There's so much written about this that it just makes them feel so bad because they're comparing themselves to these unrealistic images of women.
Right.
Now imagine that you're a finicky boy and you think that you need to be a girl and you're comparing yourself to the opposite sex. Think about what that's going to make you feel like, how you're going to feel when you're looking at the girls and you're like, I'm supposed to look like them.
Right. Like Doris Day or Marilyn Monroe
An
or Michael Jackson was
impossible
obsessed with Elizabeth Taylor. Not going to happen, dude.
It's an impossible standard to achieve. So you could induce this if you indoctrinated a child into it. So yeah, no, they're just making future patients. I don't believe in true trans. In all of my studies of trans history, I've never run into a biological innate origin for trans. I've run into internalized homophobia, I've run into failed boys, I've run into failed girls, I've run into autogynephilia, autoandrophilia, but I've never seen anything that's biological that people are born with that makes them trans.
So you think
There's
it's a
no
social
evidence of
construct,
that.
like I was
Yeah,
told gender is
so you
originally.
have to
Yeah.
make people trans. People have to believe they're trans. They have to feel that they're trans. And to feel that they're trans, to believe that they're trans, they have to learn about trans and
Wow.
see if they feel that way. They're
It's
not
like
going to feel
it's
that way
like
naturally.
restless leg syndrome or any of the late night ads you see for pharmaceuticals. Like you must have this, so ask your doctor because you probably really don't, and it's probably not really a thing. But this is
Yeah.
now we're talking Dr. Frankenstein stuff, next level.
Well, how many trans people go, oh, I didn't know how to explain what I felt until I found out about trans, and then I knew. They didn't know.
Yeah, and that's where they
They
get the
just
parents to buy into it by saying, "Do you want a live boy or a dead girl?" To guilt them
Oh,
into it.
that's just complete like twisting of history. If there was any data behind that, that Chase Strangio lady with the ACLU, she would have given it to the Supreme Court, and you know she would have. If you actually look at trans history and you go back to the Harry Benjamin standard, they had a chart, and suicidal ideation was only listed for type 6 true transsexuals, which was this demographic, a 6-type typology. There was this one demographic of people that were mentally unstable, did body mutilation, were suicidal, desperately wanted to have their genitals removed. This is what I thought I was because of the trauma. I desperately wanted to have my genitals removed. And that demographic was observed to have suicidal ideation in the 50s and 60s. Only 6% of trans people get bottom surgery. Think about that. The only ones that were even observed to have suicidal ideation back then were the most severe cases. And if we look at society today, like even with all of the access, it's still between 6 to 10% of trans women get bottom surgery, you know? So those are the only ones that would even historically have been at risk of suicide, but we tell every kid who feels this way and we tell their parents that they're at risk of suicide if they don't affirm it. That's nonsense. It comes from nowhere. There's no data for that.
No, it comes from DC. What was it, and the EU and all the rest, it's not just us. What was the moment or slow accumulation of moments where you realized that transitioning was not the answer for you anymore? How did you psychologically and logistically come to the decision to detrans? Because it was so hard and painful you just described to get to that one point. Now you gotta undo it. What were your fears about making that choice, especially publicly?
I was canceled by the left at the height of my life, started running a podcast talking about trans issues, learned that my entire life was based on a lie, and then froze and almost killed myself.
Froze?
Um, oh yeah, completely froze. It was like I hit a brick wall in my mind. I
Oh,
literally could not get over it. I was a mess. I ended up getting into therapy um, with a really great guy, and I've been seeing him for all of 2025 and 2026. It started like once a month, twice a month, and now I go to therapy weekly. Um, and so I hit this wall where I realized that I wasn't really an anomaly for having all the trauma that I have, that I was more of the template. When I was reading Magnus Hirschfeld, a lot of those stories were very familiar. They resonated with me. And I was like, oh, it's been people like me all the way back to the 1910s, since
hmm.
early 20th century. Um, and so when I realized that like there was no real true trans and there's no way I could be true trans, that this is all just a mixed bag diagnosis, it was like, well, then what did I do this for? It was devastating. If I didn't have a partner, I think I'd be dead from that
Oh
moment.
gosh. Well, thankfully
You
you're
know, if I
not.
did, but I have a loving partner. I'm very happy with him, and like wanting to hold on to that is kind of what kept me going. You know, and then so I had this kind of compounding crisis where I hated that I had transitioned, and I didn't want to be seen as trans, and I didn't want to be trans, and I had all of this regret, but I didn't know what to do, and so I got into therapy, and like there's this whole concept of taking it day by day, and so I did. I took it day by day, and in the end, like I actually call myself an ideologically desisted ladyboy. It's a mouthful. I use D-trans. This is a short form, right? Ideologically desisted ladyboy is the autistic label preference, okay? Because you can't grow your body parts back.
No.
Like, what do you do when you're 35 and you have that final love that you've always wanted in your life, but your entire life has been built on a lie? You've mutilated your body in the name of that lie. Your health is precocious. You're not going to live as long. I've got some time left in this world, and I'm going to do whatever I can to live as true and honest to myself while maintaining my relationship.
And what I
And
admire most
don't.
about your story is that this is a very lonely, isolated, you probably feel like you're boxed in your own mind, like that Metallica music video where you can't speak, but you're still here. But you advocate for survivors of surgical harm. So you turn around to try to help others instead of just worrying about yourself and whatever plane meds you're going to be on tomorrow versus today. What are the permanent physical changes you live with today that can't be undone beyond the body? What's the emotional journey of detransitioning, like grieving what was lost and learning to live with what remains?
It's like balancing on a razor's blade. I've written some songs about it. Dancing on a razor's edge, where like I don't really feel seen. I feel kind of invisible. People don't really understand me. They like, for example, like you just walk through the world with your wife or something, and at a glance, people can take some things away from you. People don't know what I am. I'll go talk to people for 5, 10 minutes and they'll think that I'm a female who detransitioned. Or I'll go tell them, I've had meetings with people and they still didn't understand. I met Nancy Mace and told her about what happened to me as a teenager. And, she thought I was a female to male detransitioner. And like I corrected her obviously, and she's very loving towards gay people. She was very sweet to me, but like I'm very confusing, so I feel invisible, and I also like I can't really fix that. It goes beyond like I can't get my genitals back. Then it goes to like how far can I push my expression without nuking my life, because there's a point where my partner would no longer want to be with me, wherein too many physical changes in one direction would be no different than transitioning on a partner, right? So for me, it's come down to expression and radical self-acceptance.
Mhm.
I'm a non-conforming gay guy. Like,
Mhm.
some
Well, your
people look at me
communication
and might
skills make
mistake
all the
me.
difference. I mean, the fact that you can articulate this so well, most people probably couldn't. So good for you for being outspoken. And you're not invisible. You're on the show. I saw you in front of the city council, and Seattle, actually Portland too, the entire Northwest, famously progressive on LGBTQ issues. Yet you have testified before the city's LGBTQ commission and faced hostility right there in your own city, my old city. Not Vincent. Vincent's the guy, but the rest of them are nuts. What is it like being an outspoken transitioner in Seattle specifically? Do you feel there's room in that city's culture for critical conversations about medical transition? Or are they like, do not ask why, move to Oregon?
I am trading labor for bodyguard services right now. I've lost 4 jobs in 3 years.
Wow.
Um, I've had them show up outside my house, paint the garage. They've hired private investigators to dig through my life. They doxed my husband, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my mother, my father. Um, so I get threats every single day. I can't walk through Seattle. I went down there and picked up my friend from SeaTac, and we went and did a little shopping and, walked around town a little bit, and we stopped in the park and sat down on a bench and were immediately assaulted and mobbed. She got kicked in the face multiple times. By the time I got her away from them, they jumped me from behind and tried to steal my concealed carry and robbed me blind, had me on my knees, and they were pepper spraying and beating me. So safety, non-existent, very violent being here and being outspoken. And being detrans and being here is confusing. I'm confusing to people, and it makes sense that I'm confusing to people. I
Not a
find the
very not a very
conservative.
tolerant party, that's for darn sure. As I know
No,
they
the
advertise they
conservatives
are.
here are great though.
Yeah,
The
isn't that
conservatives
amazing?
here.
The ones that are
Yeah.
they're constantly under attack, the Nazis.
Well, I've like the things I hear from the left versus the things I hear from the right. Like I had a leftist tell me in May of last year that my God hated me. She saw my cross around my neck, and I was debating, and this woman comes up and says, "Hey, don't talk to her. She's just trying to rage bait you." And I said, I'm a gay man," and then the woman goes, "Your God hates you," And I've never had a Christian say that to me,
No,
ever.
they know
I've
not
never
what
had
they
a
do and they know
conservative
not what
say
they
that to
say.
me.
It's just rude at that point. It's not even biblical. But so I think you
Mm.
were just telling us the story about fellow defraternizer Hendrix, right? Where you were attacked in Seattle, a group of mostly trans suspects, which is weird. Jimi Hendrix is from Seattle, born and buried there, but that's interesting. Can you share how I apologize if it's not she, how Hendrix is doing? Or is it the same as you, or are there degrees? Like, are you public enemy number one, or is it just anybody who wants to talk out?
Well, I mean, Hendrix isn't here, so she was visiting me from out of state. I think
Oh,
where she's at, she's public enemy number one, which
oh,
is not quite like as radical as here. But that doesn't mean that they don't try to destroy her life. Like they're literally trying to get her bar to like license taken away. They've grieved her with the bar in Michigan like multiple times.
she's a
So
lawyer.
she's fighting that. She's a lawyer.
Hmm.
Um, and so they've been harassing her and trying to drive her crazy and take away her law license ever since she came out. We met in 2024 and we had a lot of long talks about autogynephilia and why I believed the things that I believed. And I think she was one of those reasonable people. And when you're reasonable and you're within trans, that doesn't always go that well. And she was talking to a bigot.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, I mean, kicking you in the
eventually
face and
she
robbing you
canceled
blind
her.
is not exactly the way to win hearts and minds in a political debate. Why do you think Democrats, and you mentioned Nancy Mace, she's a South Carolina Republican, why do you think Democrats nationally have grabbed onto this issue? The numbers aren't even there to win national elections, but electorally, why do you think? Is it to spread Medicare around, or are people particularly active now that Roe versus Wade is off the table? Where's the energy come from?
The energy just comes from them trying to maintain their little voting circle with the Alphabet Mafia. I mean, they got Obergefell. All of the LGB orgs were stationed around gay marriage. All of the gay money was going into these orgs, pumping them up for gay marriage. And then we got gay marriage. So now you have this huge NGO industry, a whole industry built out of advocating for gay marriage that needed the next big issue. The next big issue was trans, and all of the NGOs started pushing trans. This literally, the explosion of trans in our society, the mass visibility of trans in our society happened in 2013 and 2015 as gay marriage was won and settled. That's when it happened. It happened with the depathologization of trans into the DSM-5, moving away from gender identity disorder and more stringent diagnostic patterns towards affirmation with the generation of the DSM-5 diagnosis, and Obergefell. So you had it happening from two different ends. You had it being watered down in medicine so you could mass medicalize, and you had all the power that the gays built up being seized by the trans activists. And then those two things pushed forward over the past decade. The Democratic Party is just catering to their base. They will blindly support the sterilization of American children until it costs them. That's why I say, like, until the Democrats change on this issue, I will never, ever vote for a Democrat. I would never vote for a Democrat. Like, they just need to lose. They need to lose repeatedly and hard until they drop the trans thing.
Yeah, well, they're about to see this because the DSA, if they ultimately get in bed with the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamics, they don't like it either. So it's going to be, they'll turn on their own real fast. You have a video out titled, "Are Gender Support Groups Safe?" Given that you once found refuge in those spaces, what do you think has changed? And what are you seeing now in how young people, especially teens, they do say that the identification as gay has declined. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they say are shepherded through these groups, and what red flags do parents need to look for?
So they were never safe. When I went through that support group, it was nothing more than a mass indoctrination center with free therapy to give it a tint of validity. Now the therapy gatekeeping is completely removed, and that setting has been mass produced on the internet. So, I mean, those groups were never safe. If you talk to any detransitioner who went through those support groups, they'll tell you about the old men that they interacted with in those support groups. Like, I personally feel like I became an object for some of the people that I was interacting
A
with when I
grooming
was
factory,
younger.
sort of. Yeah.
Um, and like so they've never been safe. I tell people in Washington state that if their child has begun to be gender confused, to leave the state, because in my state, if you don't affirm a child's gender, the government can take your child from you and classify it as child abuse,
Yeah.
and then the state
People
can
don't believe me when
transition
I
them
tell them
in
that out of
foster
state, by
care.
the way. When I have that conversation here in Tennessee, for example, they just can't believe it. Even when we were looking for
Oh,
schools for my daughter to attend for her junior and senior year in high school, they couldn't believe what I was telling them was going on. And that was before
well,
even the law passed.
in Washington State, Oregon, and California, the way that these states have moved, and a lot of the blue states, they have education on gender going down into preschool. We just got it in preschool in Washington State. They have community health clinics that are connected to the schools but are still community health clinics, so they have HIPAA and everything like that. And what ends up happening is, for example, on Mercer Island, they had the schools doing name changes on students without the parents' permission. So children are being taught this framework, they're being socially transitioned under this framework at school, meaning clothing, pronouns, names, presentation, right, at school. But then at the proper age, which is still a minor, 12, 13 years old, I think it's 13, you get your HIPAA protections as a child. Now that child can be transitioned in the school attached health center, and the health center doesn't have to tell the parents. Not only do they not have to tell the parents can't find out about it because the HIPAA protections protect the child from the parents. And they did all of this under the name of, like, basically freeing these children from bigoted parents. But again, no child is trans. This is not the same thing as growing up and hitting, puberty and realizing you don't like girls. It's not the same. It's a mental illness,
Yeah. I saw recent
So
reports where a teacher was doing same-sex kissing courses and grading them
right.
on this. Like, if
And
that's not indoctrination, I don't know what is.
if you don't
You
affirm it, they'll
pleaded
take your kids from you.
they'll take your kids if you complain. Yeah.
I've
You
met
put
multiple parents who have contacted me after fleeing the state, after getting their kids and running because
Yeah.
of this.
Well, Chris Reichdahl's an evil person. He looks like Dilbert, but he acts like the devil. You pleaded with adults to let kids grow up, quote unquote, and stop medicalizing gender questioning youth. If you had the power to set policy tomorrow, whether at the state or JFK or RFK Jr. level, what would it look like? What age or diagnostic safeguards would you demand before anyone is put on a medical pathway?
Oh, you're trying to get me extra canceled. I think I can get canceled more. Um, well, I don't
No, I
believe
don't
in
want you
transitioning.
canceled at all because that means I would get canceled too.
I don't believe in transitioning children at all, and I consider the current diagnostic standards to be fundamentally unethical. I think gender dysphoria is this list of symptoms that can be caused by a lot of different things, and if you're not guiding the patient to asking the question why and understanding where these feelings come from, then you're not actually operating from a place of medical ethics. So I think the entire system would have to be reworked. I don't know if there is a demographic where I feel that this is truly necessary. In my case, it would have been internalized homophobia and trauma. Like, it's not necessary for autogynephiles. They would have to show me the demographic where this is a necessary medical intervention, because I find it fundamentally unethical and illogical. Like I said with anorexia, we would not tell an anorexic just because they feel like they're fat when they are starving themselves to death that they are fat, and then offer surgeries and stuff to affirm their desire to lose weight that they should not lose, right? But for some reason, you have this traumatized male or this female, for whatever reason, they think that they're born in the wrong body, they hate their genitals, they want to kill themselves, they're cutting, whatever the case may be. And the society thinks the sound approach is to affirm that delusion and then cut up their bodies while not asking the question why. So, I mean, I think if you want to go and get these surgeries, by all means, go get them on the private market as cosmetic.
You
That's my
think
position. And unless they can show exactly what true trans is and why it's ethical to do this kind of intervention with a mental illness, I don't support it at all.
Do you think doctors should be held liable? I know Harmeet Dillon's law firm is representing Chloe Cole against Kaiser. They very similar story here. Took an autistic girl, gave her the idea that this was possible, took her down the path, and now she regrets it. Do you think until they feel some monetary liability pain, this just continues, or what do you think of that?
I think they need to expand the statute of limitations around trans medical interventions to a minimum of 20 years.
20 years old,
Um,
like cigarettes or something like
no,
that?
20 years after the medical interventions.
Oh,
So when you look at regret rates for a double gonadectomy, the average regret rate is 8 years. The statute of limitation is 2 to 3 years.
mm,
Okay, that's the statute of limitations. And the thing is, we've been operating like basically on a level of human experimentation. There's so many myths going on. It's not just the myth of suicide, the myth that detransition rates is low. The 1% number comes from their own community polling. Apostates don't answer trans polls. You know, regret rate averages at 8 years. Okay, clinical follow-up doesn't go past 2 years. That's your surgeons following up after they've cut you up. They do a couple weeks, a month, a couple months, 6 months, a year, at most maybe 2 years. If there were some complications, you might be experiencing clinical follow-up from having your genitals ripped off. Regret, 8 years away. 8 years away. Your
right.
research studies are generally 2 to 5 years, but they have a 60% fall off rate, 20 to 60%. A lot of that's going to be the detransitioners. So we don't know how many people are going to regret this, but we're blindly pushing people into it. And I
Especially
think the
at younger and
solution,
younger ages, sure.
right, the
Yeah,
solution is 100% to open up the pathway for as many lawsuits as possible to make them pay until they really wind it back and reassess the situation.
I agree with you. What do you wish the broader culture, whether gay, straight, conservative, progressive, what do you wish they understood about the detransitioning experience?
I wish they understood that trans is built on a pillar of sexism and traditionalism. That's what it's built on. These core ideas of feeling like a woman or feeling like a man, they're ephemeral, right? Like it's always built on the way society has treated women. That's literally what it's built on. You have performative femininity defines being a woman. You know, having long hair, having nails, having dresses defines being a woman to these people.
Well, this
And
can be
that in
illustrated
part,
in the sports then, because
right.
yeah, like Riley
And,
Gaines
and
having to compete against a guy who says he's a man in the locker room.
have you ever heard of horseshoe theory?
Tell us.
The further you go in either extreme, the closer you end in the end. So horseshoe, you have a
Oh yeah,
line, you're
coming
going
around in a
further
circle.
away, but it comes together with a horseshoe, right?
Yeah, sure.
So trans says that, oh, you little boy, you're swishy and effeminate and sensitive. You must be a girl in the wrong body. That's what trans says. Oh, you tomboy, you like playing sports and you like wrestling in the mud and all your friends are boys. You must be a boy in the wrong body. That is traditionalism and sexism repackaged. Then on the far right, you have people going, "Oh, you're a sissy. You're crying. Man up. Like you're
Cowboy
not
up, yeah.
supposed to be like this because you're a boy." That's the same messaging. A lot of people who end up in trans grow up in environments where they were not taught to love themselves for who they are. And I'm not talking about homosexuality, I'm talking about human expression. And that's what I want conservatives to understand. Some boys are just going to be effeminate. Some girls are
Hmm.
going to be tomboys. I think most conservatives get that, and that's
Hmm.
natural. God is one being, but he embodies all of us. So, of course, males have a diversity of human expression. And so, like, let's not be the horseshoe theory. Don't be your child's first bully. Teach them to love themselves.
Yeah, that reminds me of like when I was growing up, there was always the Barbies with dresses for the girls and the G.I. Joes with the guns for the boys. And if a guy was like, I want to play with the girls' things, like, what are you, a sis? Like, you can
Right,
psychologically kind of steer them in the wrong direction. Doesn't mean that they're going to
right,
grow up and be a transitioner. It just means that like they just want to play with some plastic, just
right. And
like
it's
their
like,
friend.
it's okay to say, all right, yeah, that's fine. Love
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Love you,
love you.
son. You know, Like
Like all
I
these
just think
celebrities that have these dresses wearing, it's just ironic, the numbers in LA that are doing this. That's different. That's saying we're going to let you play with it, but we're also going to dress you up and make it your lifestyle. And then now you've got
right.
yourself an indoctrinated child.
Well,
Uh,
it's just like Jazz Jennings. The parents saw this boy who was a little swishy, right? And they thought he's a girl on the inside. That's their sexism. They're putting that onto their child. They're putting their mindset onto their child. He
yeah,
didn't even grow up to be a gay boy. He's
no.
straight. He likes women.
That
Like, you
story
know?
seemed to be more about the parents wanting to fit into the cultural it
Hmm.
thing than him himself, which is a very much a tragedy. And Jean Benet Ramsey
Right.
could be similar to that. Like they really,
Well,
really wanted her to win pageants, and so they
and
put makeup on her.
children don't make these connections. The child doesn't make the connection that it's wrong for them to like the color pink. The adults put that in the child's mind. So
Yeah,
the idea
and they
that
just want to please
the boy
usually.
is wrong as a boy, the
Yeah.
idea that he's wrong as a boy because of this or that, that's something he's getting from the environment. And then the child is trying to please their parents by steering away from whatever they're interested in.
In a recent post, you wrote about turning 44. Sorry if that you don't want people to know you, but you wrote about it and
I'm
choosing.
35.
Oh, okay, I got my numbers wrong. But if tell me if I'm correct about this, choosing to rebuild rather than hide, to live rather than just survive, right? That was the point.
Hmm.
Age wasn't the matter, but the point is that what does rebuilding look like for you now, and what are you moving toward, and what message do you have for someone who may be deep in transition but quietly wondering if it's a mistake?
I I'm building towards finding a way to just operate and be happy in my body stuck. That's what I'm building towards. How do you live the life of a respectable man as someone who's had my foundation? Um, and like what drove me out of trans was a combination of things, but the core of it was that trans started really upsetting society. you know they really just went too far. And so I feel like there was this point where I was watching Blair White and Buck Angel, and I was like, I can't stand these people. They're ruining everything. I don't want like society to be this way. um, and I think I realized that like trans is moving the football onto someone else. Like they're putting responsibility onto other people. Like I always say, like male violence against non-conforming men is a men's issue. And so then people go at me like, why don't you cut your hair? Why don't you conform more? Why don't you look more masked? And it's like, well, I personally want men to see me as a man looking like this and be like, okay, that's the society I want. I want a society where effeminate boys and masculine girls can just use the bathrooms in peace without being bullied in high school. And I believe that we have already progressed to the point where that is usually generally the case. For my entire adult life, I used third spaces until a couple years ago, and then I started using the men's. I walk into the men's in cocktail dresses, I walk into the men's in whatever I want to wear, and I don't experience violence. But you know what I do get? I get genuine human connections now because I'm not lying to everybody around me and living a lie. And that didn't require me stopping being who I was because I was already living a lie. I wasn't a woman on the inside. I was just a weird, quirky, autistic gay guy, with a lot of trauma and a weird fashion sense that likes dresses and suits and scarves and jewelry. And so that's not going anywhere. What's going away is what was in here, which was this idea that there was anything wrong with me, that I needed to do this, that I need to present this way or look this way, and I need to fit into this mold that's created by traditionalism in order to be happy. I don't.
And what did you leave? What impression did you leave the Mill Creek City Council with after you had your time to speak? Did they reach out to you? Are they going to be helpful to you? Do you have to go back again and again and again to get their attention? What was your impression?
My impression was that Vince and a couple of the others are really sweet. Um, so there's two city council members that I think are pretty reasonable on this, and the rest probably just put me in the bigot category. The mayor looked like she desperately wanted me to shut up.
It's
Like she
definitely,
just,
yeah.
please make this stop. Like, please make this stop. So my takeaway is that I will be there a lot. That like I like that feeling she had of I wish this would stop. I'm going to be there to give public testimony as often as
What
possible.
do you want them to
And
do?
what I want them to do is be reasonable and actually look at the data and not move in lockstep with the Democratic Party. Like, I want them, they were talking about doing an impact study on raising the pride flag on municipal property. Well, if they're going to do an impact study, I want them to look at the data from the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine. I want them to go pull up GenSpect and look at the data, read what like doctors who work with detransitioners are saying, what actually led to them feeling this way, and recognize the system that we have in Washington state is unethical. And if they put that flag on municipal property, then that they are signing it as something that they endorse. They're signing an endorsement for affirmation. They're
Mhm.
signing an endorsement for mutilating children.
Well, it is a little island up there because they were successful to keep pot shops out of their county, just or their city, city borders or whatever you call it,
Yeah.
territory. So that it's very possible that they could be an island amongst that sea of crazy. Ari, I want to thank you for your time, your honesty, your truth. Uh, I'm glad you felt safe enough to say what you've said. Tell everyone where they can go to find out more about you and follow your social media.
It's apostate Ari, so that's apostate like the religious term because I left a cult, and then ARI, and it's on all social medias: TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. When you pull it up, you'll know it's the right one because it says the Transphobic Historian.
And you still have your podcast or no more?
Actually, so the Truthful TS became the Transphobic Historian on YouTube,
Okay.
Apostate Ari, and I'm going to start doing interviews with trans widows and honest GPs who are talking about their experiences in transition as autogynephilic transsexuals,
Mm.
as well as other individuals from the community. We're going to be doing like walking around the boroughs around Seattle, asking people about different initiatives, debates, and interviews.
Mm. Well, you're very strong, very articulate, and very learned. So you are the right person for the job. Thanks
Oh.
again. Hang on, everybody. I will be right back. Oh, you have one more thing you'd like to add?
Oh, absolutely, actually. So I want people to know, anybody watching this who has a gender confused kid, that 86% of children will desist if you don't affirm their gender throughout development. You just let them go through puberty. 86% of them are just going to desist. And having a trans life is a brutal life. It shortens your lifespan, lowers your opportunities, and it's way better to have a kid that gets to grow up being normal. So please, just let them grow up.
All right, absolutely. We'll put your contacts in not your contacts, but your socials in our show notes. And I really want to thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Thanks for coming back. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Apostate Ari, for coming on and telling us what most people don't know and don't understand, that trans people are deeply, deeply wounded individuals that often don't know what they are signing up for, and at an impressionable age to not understand the lifetime consequences of their actions. It's the grown-ups, the medical professionals that are needed to stop looking at profits and start looking at these people as mental health crisis victims to stop the harm. Whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, or the Nuremberg trials against medical malpractice for mutilations and against informed consent and safe and effective? The whole medical industrial complex is at shame, and not just for COVID or vaccines. Save SRFK Jr. I don't think so. It's going to take awareness like Ari for parents to stop believing the lie. Do you want a live boy or a dead girl? Guilting suicide to get $100,000 of lifetime treatments to these doctors. What a world. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. It's good to be back. If you like what you hear, please subscribe if you haven't already by now. You should have. It's been 5 years. And pass it around. We only grow with your help and still ad-free. And we've done a great job of that in 5 years. So please keep it going. Peace in our time and glory to God.
I mean, I had goosebumps during this interview. At points, I was tearing up watching it back. So you rewind 2 weeks, we're on the campus of the University of Washington for a Riley Gaines appearance, and I did this sort of off-the-cuff 5-minute interview with a detransitioner, a biological boy who'd been convinced at a pretty young age that they must be not gay, not traumatized from child sexual assault, but they must be a woman. And so I did this 5-minute interview. It went crazy. And so many of you said we want to hear more from that person. So their name is Ari. And I mean, the before and after tells it all. I think if you're watching the show, the picture of Ari is around 16 or 17 years old, kind of right when all the, confusion and pressuring to transition to a girl was being thrust upon him. And then Ari went through years and years of life-altering medical procedures to try to present as a woman, facial feminization surgery, had his, manhood removed. I mean, you name it. And so Ari was nice enough to come in, sit down with me for about an hour. It was such an emotional interview. And I think what he really just wants, because I think the phrase detransitioner is a misnomer. You can't detransition when you've done what Ari has done to his body. There's no getting your manhood back. There's no undoing some of the surgeries and impacts of hormones. So I don't think you can really detransition at that point. You can just in your mind realize, gosh, I was just a gay man this whole time. I've destroyed my body and was convinced to do this by people who didn't have my best interests in mind. So Ari knows he can't really detransition, and I think that was clear, and that's still very, very hard on him to come to this realization that there's no going back for him. But what there is, and I think what he wants out of this, is for young people and people in positions of power to hear his story, to listen to other people like him who've actually gone through this, and to understand how negative and irreversible the trauma of radical gender ideology is. Are you happy with who you are right now?
I haven't gotten to the place of forgiving myself for believing the lie. So no, I'm happy with my husband. And that's the thing. Like, I didn't come to this position because my surgery was botched. I didn't come to it because life got too hard. I actually came to the position of detransition at the height of my life. Mm-hmm. I'm well off. I have a loving husband. I have 2 dogs, the white picket fence, the Tiffany on my hand. And I just realized it was all a lie. And I couldn't live with it. And there's no real fully going back. There's just figuring out how to live a life like this, where you bought a lie, you removed your genitals. I'll never fully pass as one or the other. People will always be confused when they see me. And if I express myself in a non-conforming way, they're just not even gonna know I'm a gay guy, generally. And if I go too far mask, it'll impact my husband.
Can you envision, you're still so young, can you envision at some point feeling finally comfortable in your body?
I don't think I'll ever feel comfortable in my body again. I think that the best I'm going to get is finding some way to let go of how I feel about what I've done and be at peace that I did what I could to make sure nobody else does it.
And what would your message be to young people who are struggling with these same issues, or even to parents who are watching who might have a kid who's starting to bring up?
The idea of true trans is a lie. It's a lie that's been perpetuated for decades. There is no reason to medicalize a non-conforming gay boy or a non-conforming gay woman. Most of the people who are gay who feel like this, 80% of them will desist as they grow up. They will stop thinking that they're women or stop thinking that they're men if you just let them grow up. And the vast majority of homosexuals I have met who have medicalized as far as I have are survivors. Upwards of 50% of the men I know who have had bottom surgery, who have medicalized, who are gay, are survivors. They're lying to our entire society, and it's coming at the cost of children and survivors.
Yeah, tough. And I think one of the aspects of that interview that I think it surprised me in the moment, but talking about his relationship with his husband. And his husband, married someone who basically presented as a woman. And so Ari is, you could tell, kind of terrified because Ari still looks like very feminine. And I talked to him about that in the interview, still has longer hair, comes across because of all these surgeries. I mean, I still don't think he looks like a woman, but definitely comes across more feminine. And he's worried about reverting to his true self because of who his husband married. And I don't know anything about their relationship, but I imagine, it's a bizarre, tough situation to be in. And so I give Ari all the credit in the world, even going through all of this right now, being willing to sit down and talk about it. But you can tell during so many parts of the interview how traumatized he still is and how he's struggling with what he did to his body, and he knows he can't undo it, and just trying to create meaning out of that experience somehow to help other people. So I absolutely love Ari. Second time meeting him, so glad he's now becoming this outspoken character in this whole saga that we have nationally.
Which is really the problem. We have a generalized label that's been watered down and made more general. We have an ideology that's promoted the concept of not asking the question why, because asking why is bigotry. And embedded within the ideology, we have a group of men with very perverse motivations for wanting to live this life. And you add all that together with the activism, and you see how we got here. This is why I'm the transphobic historian, and why reading trans history caused me to crack and detransition.
Time is running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. Then I turned myself to face me, but I never caught a glimpse of how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Changes. Didn't want to have to be a richer man. Changes. Just wanted to be a better man. Time may change me, but I can't trace time. Ooh, yeah. I watch the ripples change the size, but never leave the stream of warm and permanent sand. So the days float through my eyes, but still the days seem the same, just the same, quite the same. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds, they're immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Changes. Don't tell us to grow up and out of it. Changes. Oh, changes. Pretty soon you left us up in our next land. Time may change me. I am trace time. Strange fascination fascinating me.
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.